Hey Dev Team, welcome back to Flutter with Drag, to what I hope is going to be the last episode of this current series. I want to get it live, get everything up and running, fix a couple of minor bugs that I'm sure are there, and put our servers on the web rather than running them on localhost and get all of that configured, so on and so forth. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is come over to our Firebase console, and we're going to just go through a couple of the things that we use just to make sure everything's configured correctly. So we're using authentication, that's fine. We've got our sign-in method, we're just using email and password, that's fine. We could go through the templates and you can edit these templates if you wanted to for the password reset and things like that. I'm going to leave that as is. Next, I'm going to let's come to our Firestore database. So we've got our database. Let's check the rules for our database. And in here we have basically a rule which says all our documents we're going to allow read and write if the request time is less than this request time, which has expired already. And that's fine because we've set our app up so that we're not, the app doesn't directly communicate with Firestore in our particular case. It's not always a good idea. In fact, there's some very good reasons why not to do this, but this is how we've gone with it with our API as the interface. So in fact, we're not going to allow read and write requests to this database for anybody for any reason. So we don't need this timestamp anymore. We can take that out. And if we were to put in here true, basically we're going to allow read and write if true, which essentially means allow everybody to read and write every document all the time. So obviously the opposite of that is false. Allow read write if false. And that's not going to allow anything to communicate with our database other than our API, which is using the admin SDK, and that overrides, that has all permissions anyway. So let's publish that, and that'll take a minute or two to go through, but essentially that's now our database hardened. Okay, we're not using real-time database or extensions. Storage, same sort of thing. We have all these images in there. These are really for the profile images that we did. And the rules for here, let's see how they're set up. Okay, well, currently all paths read write if false. So again, or automatically by default, that's stopped all access to this storage other than through our API. Now that's not entirely true because all the images also have this meta tag, this access token. And so if we copy that and paste that into our browser, we get the image. And so anybody who has both the name of the image and our URL and the token will be able to access the image, but it's only readable. You can't write via that, and that's fine for our purposes. That will allow things to work wonderfully. Okay, so that's that hardened. We're not using hosting. We are using functions. We have a document update, so that's not readable from the web or anything. That's just going to be looking at our order ID document, and on an update, that function is being run. So I'm quite happy with that. We can leave that for a moment and come on over to our server. Now I've got the server running. I'm going to stop the server for a moment because we now need to deploy this to the net. Now, we can't do this in one step, or at least not easily, so we're going to do this in a few steps. The reason we can't do this in one step is, as part of it, we need a signing secret from Stripe, and that needs to go in our environment document.env, and we haven't got that, and we need to get that. We need a web server, and we haven't got a web server, so we can't get that. So we're going to have to put it up knowing that that's not going to work and that's going to fail. Get the web server URL and then put that into Stripe, come back, fix it in our code, and then upload it again. Okay, so that's the process. It'll take a couple of steps, but we'll get there. Now, we're going to be using Google Cloud for this. And to do that, you think, what is Firebase then if it's not Google Cloud? Well, Google Cloud is a load of services, things that are running under the Google infrastructure. And Firebase is a front end to some of the more useful ones for app development and things like that. However, they are all part of the Google Cloud. And if we come to console.cloud.google.com and select your project, I'm in Global Conference, what we have here is the full access to all of the functions and resources that are available within Google Cloud. And we can see here that the project number is 8189926. Let's just look at the last four, 0904. And if we come to our global conference and our settings, we can see that it's the same one. Okay, so that this Firebase is just a nice front end for Google Cloud for us. And we can prove that here. We can, for example, come into here and look at all the things that we've got, such as cloud storage. Let's come to cloud storage and our global conf appspot.com, which is our bucket. And look, there are our images. And the nice thing about the cloud is we can do things here which we can't actually do in Firestore. So, for example, if I click on this image, I can come in here and we can edit things. So, for example, we can edit the metadata. And look, we've got this Firebase storage download token, which is the token I was just talking about to download something. We can actually edit it directly here. There is no facility for doing that in Firebase. You'd have to programmatically do it. There is no way of editing this file location. We can revoke it and generate a new one, but we can't just edit the one that's already there. Coming back, let's type in Firestore here. Fire storage and Firestore are almost the same. And look, here are our events and things that we've got. And we've got little menus next to it, so we can delete things and stuff. A lot of what we can do already, but we have this nice feature here to import and export. So if we wanted to take a backup and things like that, we can do that from here. So what I'm saying is basically under the cloud platform, we can tend to do more than we can do under the Firebase thing, because the Firebase front end is basically simplified to make it as easy and as user-friendly as possible. So if you get stuck sometimes in Firebase and you think, why can't I do that? That seems like I should be able to do something. Then the chances are within the whole platform, you can do it. Okay, so what about our server? Well, our server is going to be running under, find it, this service here called App Engine. Okay, now we haven't got an App Engine up and running yet. We need to do that. And to do that, we need to install the Google Cloud command line interface. And if you just Google Cloud CLI, you will come to this document, which is the URL anyway for you. And that will tell you how to install the Google Cloud for your operating system. On Windows, for example, it's just a case of downloading the installer and running it. There's a few things to look through, but you just work through that and you'll get it installed. Once it's installed, let's come back, we should be able to then run gcloud. and by itself it won't do anything, it'll give me an error message, but I can see that the commands are there and we're ready to go. Now we need to log in because the command line interface doesn't have access to your project, and that's as simple as typing gcloud auth login. That will take us to a page where you just go to this URL and log into your Google account, click allow, and we're in. Okay, that's it, we're authenticated. Next, we need to put in our project name. And for me, if I'm just coming into the global conference Firestore, it's called global-conference. And so we need to set that up exactly as the instructions are just showing us to do. In fact, we can just copy and paste that and put in global conference like so. And that's updated and we're ready to go. We can now interact with Google Cloud. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, we want to take our server code and we want to compile it and we want to upload it to Google Cloud, and we want to do this a few times. So I'm going to set up a way of automating this, and to do that I'm going to install a couple more node dependencies, npm dependencies, within our server. So if we come to our package.json, you can see we've already got some dependencies like the Agora access token that we did last time and various other things. The ones I'm installing now are all developer dependencies. We don't want it to form part of our code, it's just forming something that's useful for us during the development. So I'm going to run npm install, and the three files or three packages I want are rimraf, and I'll explain them all as we go through, npm -run -all, and copy file. I want to make sure that they are saved as developer dependencies. So let's hit that and give that a few moments to install. Okay, so that's just not taking too long, and as you can see, they're run. We've also got a warning from installing that we have 6 high severity vulnerabilities. That is, the node packages are written by other people, and when a security vulnerability is found, npm basically through the npm tool notifies you of that. Sometimes they can be fixed automatically, sometimes they can't. Let's try and fix it in this case, and we can run npm audit fix. And let's see if there's a fix for those. Yeah, and it looks like it's removed some packages, added other packages, and checked everything out. And we now have no vulnerabilities or known vulnerabilities in our code. Okay, so we've got this serve script that's running at the moment, and that's the file that we've been, that's the command we've been running to run our server, npm run serve. I'm going to create a few more commands that we can use. So the first one I'm going to do is called clean, and the name of the command is entirely up to you. And that's going to clean our distribution folder. Basically, we're going to recursively delete everything in that distribution folder before we then rebuild. And that makes sure there's no things left lying around. And that's exactly what rimraf does. Rimraf is a recursive delete for us, and simply recursive delete the distribution folder. Next, we want to build our server. So it's almost like this, but instead of watching, we're just going to build it and leave it. So again, we're going to use our TypeScript, and we're going to use the configuration file that we have in our folder which is tsconfig.json, and that's there, that's that file. Okay, then we're going to do another step afterwards, which is going to be deploying, but we haven't got there yet. I don't want to do that just yet. I'm going to create a command called build and deploy, even though immediately it's not going to deploy. And I'm going to use this runs, which is part of the npm run all, and it basically means run in sequence. And first of all, I want to run the clean, which is that, then the build, which is that, and then afterwards, once I'm happy, we're going to run the deploy. So let's save that, and if I run that now, we should see our dist folder here disappear and then reappear moments later. So npm run build, and I've spelled deploy wrong. Let's put that in. Deploy, build and deploy. Okay, let's watch it. There you are, it's disappeared and hopefully reappears. Okay, so if we look in our dist folder, we can see that we have our compiled code. Okay, so the final step, that seems to have worked. Final step is to deploy it. So let's build our deploy command. Don't know why I keep leaving the L out of that. And that is going to be our gcloud app deploy. Oh my gosh, again, my keyboard's funny. Okay, I will add it here afterwards, but for now I'm going to leave it off, and I'm just going to run that by itself, and let's see what happens. npm run deploy. Okay, my keyboard's definitely wonky. Right, so we've got an error message here, and it's telling us that an app YAML file is needed, and we haven't got one of those. So let's create that in our server directory. It's a new file, app.yaml, and this basically tells the server what type of runtime environment we're using. So we're going to put in runtime, and it's nodeJS, and a version number. Okay, let's try that again. Deploy, and let's see what happens. So it's now uploading the files to Google Cloud Storage, and it will process, it will basically upload everything. There we go. We've actually now got our URL. Could have worked that out. But if we come to our app engine and we do a refresh or click on versions, you can see that we have a version of our server running. Does it work? Well, let's go to it. And we get an error. What is the error? I forgot to put in here in a script, we need a start command, because that's what the platform uses to start our server. So what do we want to do when we start? Well, we want to go to our node, our distribution folder, and run our index.js. Okay, that's what happens when we start our server. We've also got another little problem which I need to deal with, and that's in our index. We load up on port 3000. Well, that may or may not be the case. Actually, what happens is the platform will give us a random port to load up on, and we need to sort that out. However, it's clever enough to put the port in an environment variable for us. So we need to set that up. So let's do const port equals process environment port, because that's the port it's going to be on, And if it doesn't provide one, or if we're on our local host, then we will use 3000. And we will put port there, not post, port there instead. Okay. The other thing is now we have our URL for our server, so we can copy this, even though it doesn't quite work yet, and come over to Stripe, and we can now configure Stripe. So within Stripe, of course, before you go live, you have to go through this activate payments setup to actually get it live, but we'll continue doing this in test mode. Live and test mode are identical. What we need to do is come over to the developers button, that's what I just clicked on, and webhooks. And we need to add an endpoint. Okay, what's the endpoint we want? Well, that's our server, but it's also at a particular URL. And let's just double check what that is, but I'm pretty sure within our index we've got it as /webhook. Yes, we have. So /webhook, and that will be the URL that Stripe will talk to. What do we want to happen on that URL? Well, we don't necessarily want everything to happen. And the two events that we're looking for, the one event we're looking for, was payment intent succeeded. So what we're going to do is just select in here, and you can go through it all, but payment intent succeeded. Where's that? Payment intent succeeded, right at the bottom there. Okay, occurs when a payment intent has successfully completed. That's the event we're listening for in our webhook. So I'm going to add that, and that will make sure that only that event gets sent to our webhook, because our webhook's not dealing with any of the others. Okay, let's add that endpoint. Now we get our signing secret for that. And I'm going to show it, doesn't matter, because by the time you see this video I'll have changed it. So I'm going to copy that, and we need to go and then paste that into our environment variables. So coming back to our server, we're going to be pasting it here as the Stripe signing secret. Okay, but you'll do that in your .env. So let me just do that. Okay, I've done that, and that's that. So now with that in place, we can recompile our server and deploy it. So let's just change our package here, or our scripts, to also put the deploy on. So when we build, I've got to fix my own key. We're going to run our clean, which is going to delete the folder, the build, which is going to rebuild it, and then the deploy, which is going to deploy it. So let's save that and run npm run build and deploy. And this time it's a different letter I got wrong. All right, we'll give that a few moments. Okay, and that's done. So if we come over to our console and refresh it, we can now see we've got this new version which is running, and if we click on it, it takes a few seconds the first time, but there we are. Hello from the Express server. I think we're running. I think that should be fine. Now you'll notice here it doesn't delete the old versions. You need to do that yourself. So I'm just going to select the old one and hit delete and let that go. That's useful so that when you're in a live environment you can quickly go back. If this version was broken, you could have selected the previous version and migrate it. Or you can even split the traffic between two different versions for testing and things. All sorts of clever stuff you can do there. Okay, that is that running. Now we need to come back to our app and finalize our app. So let's close down the server, and I'm going to copy this because we now need to access that URL, not our test URL. So within our conference repository, we have the API host that we're using, and basically I'm going to copy it for now, comment out one version, and paste in the URL that we actually want to use. Okay, let's save that and run our emulator. So I've not got the server running locally now. It should just be coming off our live server. Okay, so the app's loading up. Let's come to our debug screen. We're getting a repo failure, and that's because we're not logged in yet. We're not handling that, but we're stuck on this splash screen. So this is interesting. Well, there's a couple of things here. First of all, that splash screen obviously isn't finished yet. So I'm going to just create a logo and stick it in the assets folder. So give me a second. Okay, so I've created a very fancy logo, but it'll do. So let's come to our splash screen. And instead of the text here, we'll put in an image asset. Assets logo.png. Get rid of the const constructor. Okay, and that's loaded in, and the scaffold's not quite right, so I'm just going to change the background color to colors.white just to make sure that matches. That'll do as the splash screen. You can make it a lot fancier. Biggest problem, of course, is we're stuck on this splash screen, and I think the reason for this, if we come to main, is that we've been logged out, and in our main somewhere, yeah, we have this bit of code that listens for the auth state changing, and if the auth state is different and we are authenticated, it pushes us to the home. Otherwise, it pushes us to the login. Get rid of this comment line while we're here. Okay, so that's fair enough. That should work. So at the moment, we should be unauthenticated. So let's come to our block and to the auth and the auth block. And you see the problem we have is that when we initially start the app and we check to see whether we've got a user within, or whether that user is empty. If it is empty, or if it's not empty, we set the user up and that we set the state to authenticated. Otherwise, we set the state to unauthenticated. Then we wait for the user to change, and it all gets set up like that. Now, the problem here is what's happening is we haven't got a current user, so we're being unauthenticated, and then the onChange is getting called, and we still haven't got the onChange is still not got a user, and so it's authenticated, but the change is never happening. The state doesn't change; it remains the same. So to fix that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and have a third auth status of unknown, and that's going to be our initial status, and we're going to have a constant constructor for that as well. And in that case, it's going to be unknown. Okay, so we have an auth state unknown, and then back within the block, we're going to just start with that state. We're just going to say that when it starts up, when the app fires up for the first time, the auth status is unknown. So auth status unknown. Okay, and then it should change. So let's hit refresh, and hopefully that'll take us to the login page. Wonderful. Now, if we log in, drag at test.com, password, I can't remember, was it password 123? Let's try that. And that signed us in. Excellent. So that's that. We should now test to see whether our orders are working. So let's come to our Firestore database, orders. We can delete everything in there actually, but actually I won't. We'll keep that open. Let's put this on the same page and let's see if we can buy something. Let's buy a t-shirt and let's check out. Okay, so this is obviously communicating with the server because it's getting some information. Let's pay and hopefully that will go through. But it didn't refresh there that I saw. But I think that's it. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to actually I'm going to delete the collection just for testing. I want to see that working so I can be happy with it. Okay, so let's try that again. We'll buy a baseball cap and we'll check out. Now at that point we should have, if I reload this, we should have an order, which we have, baseball cap unpaid. Right, let's pay for it. Okay, and that's remaining unpaid. So we have got a problem here. Let's come to our webhook and view logs and view our it says it succeeded. Okay, and I found the error. Just looking at in the error logs, and I've spelt webhook wrong. It's always something. Let's come back to webhooks. You were probably all screaming at me when I did that. I need to edit this webhook, and it's not webbook, it's webhook. Update that endpoint. Okay, now we've updated that endpoint. We can view the logs for that, for the events, and we can see that I've got 3 pending events going. Let's just go with the latest, this baseball cap, and we can see it failed. Let's resend this event, and hopefully what we will see is this is the payment for $10.99. Hopefully we will see that our cap becomes paid. So let's try and, yeah, I can't really get them on both screens. Let's resend. And there you go. It's updated to paid. So yes, that's why we check and double check. So that's that's the server up and running. I think that is pretty much everything except for a final tidy up. And what do I mean by a final tidy up? Well, if I stop this, we have a logo here, which is just the Flutter logo, and we just want to update that. I think that will be the end of what we need to do. So let's install a package, and there's a package called Icons Launcher. So I'm going to, it's not a developer dependency. Oh yes it is, we're going to do it as a developer dependency, and it's icons dot underscore launcher. Let's get that added and installed. that's up and running. I'm just going to close down most of these files. I'll leave main open so we can get to it. But we want to come to our package or pubspec.yaml. Right at the bottom, we can then add in a little bit of a config here, and that is Flutter icons. And then we specify an image path, and I'm just going to use the logo I've just created. So logo.png. You can do all sorts of clever stuff with this Flutter icons package, or the icon launcher package, but I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to say yes, I want iOS icons and Android I also want. Having done that in our terminal, I'll just wait for this package to run and get everything, update the pubspec.yaml. Not in the server directory, we can run flutter pub run icons launcher :create and give that a second. Okay, having done that, let's run the app. Okay, it's coming on up. It's not actually the app we want to see though. Let's stop that again. And there we are, we have our new icon installed. The other thing I want to do is just neaten up that name. So on Android, we're going to come into our Android folder, our app source, main, Android manifest, and we need to just change this Android label. I'm just going to change it to global conf. That'll do. One more run to test that and we'll see what happens. Again, it's running. Let's stop it. And there we are, that's updated. So folks, we've a year to go to our global conference in March next year. We have an app that is bare bones, and I'll admit it, but it has covered everything we need it to cover. We're talking to APIs, we're talking to services that are outside of our scope, such as Stripe and Agora, and we've got a good base to work on this app in the future and develop it for the conference we want it to be. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. I've enjoyed creating it, and I'm looking forward to getting into a fresh new app very soon. Until then, folks, if you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It does help me out, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye now.